Do you know what I'm saying?
So the idea of, is there something else you could look at to find out, is this something I should even pay attention? For me, it's something that I think a lot of parents won't look at as something that needs attention. But if a child cannot follow just the structure of the day, that there's constant reminder to be on task, or to, where's your pencil? Wait, what'd you do with your backpack? And so what I would say is,
Well, Dr. Middleton, thank you for coming. Glad we have this opportunity to talk. Where are you from?
I am from San Antonio, Texas.
Okay.
Yeah, born and raised there. I left, went to college in North Carolina. I went to Duke University, and I left Texas then and didn't live there. And I didn't live there. I haven't lived there since I was 18. But when you're from Texas, you always say you're from Texas. And so, anyway, but I go back often. I have family that's still there. My husband and I went to the same high school, not the same time. So
High school sweethearts?
no.
Oh,
Actually,
okay.
I'm 3 years older than he is.
Okay.
And I didn't meet him until I had already graduated from college, and I was working at Baylor College of Medicine in Houston. This is actually kind of a funny story, because we like to tell people that we have an arranged marriage, because we our little sisters, he was going to Rice University in Houston and I was working at Baylor, and our little sisters were in the band at our high school. And Ben was very involved in the band when he was in our high school. He was the drum major and everything. So the band was having a big, like, garage sale, a big rummage sale, and they were trying to raise money so they could go to Disney. You know, the typical band Disney trip, right?
It's the best part of band.
Best part of band. And so our parents independently asked for us to come home and help with this big sale. So we both drove in from Houston and were helping with the sale. And my mother was just incensed that I had graduated from college with, like, no romantic anything. Like, I had no boyfriend. Like, what was my problem? Because she's a true Texas woman. So she comes up to me and says, Ben Middleton is really nice and he has really lovely parents. You should call him. You should meet up with him. And I'm like, Mom, I said, look, if you will just stay out of my situation here, I will call him. And so I did. I called him. And because I thought, she'll bug me until I do. So I called him, and then we started dating. And
Parents do give good advice from time to time.
And she totally, at the rehearsal dinner, this was my idea, they won't be together if we're free. So anyway, but it makes it really lovely, because then you can go home, you can reference something, and your partner goes, oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, because we grew up doing that.
Well, that's about as arranged marriage as you get these days.
Isn't it? Yeah. So it worked
Did you
out.
know you always wanted to go to medical school?
I didn't go to medical school. I went to
I
graduate
thought you said,
school.
okay, I misheard.
I went to graduate school. But here's the thing. I was working at the Baylor College of Medicine. Okay. This is the story of how I got into psychology, which is hilarious. I was working in an electrophysiology lab. I was working with these huge, like, electron microscopes. And I mean, we're, looking at single cells and trying to find out, if they have calcium channels that are working or not working. And it was a sort of precursor to diabetes kind of conversation. And I remember one day I was like, I appreciate the one cell thing, but I would be so much more interested to know what would happen if you had a whole bunch of these cells together. Like, what kind of behavior would it affect? And my boss was like, look, if that's what you really want to know, then you should be a clinical psychologist. I was like, what? What's a clinical psychologist? Like, because here's the thing, Brett, I never took psychology in college. And I would say this to the audience: do what you love to do when you're in college. Don't take classes because you think you're supposed to take them. I took classes because I thought I was supposed to take these classes for med school. And it turned out that I thought psychology was pretty easy. And so why should I take the class? Because it's an easy class. Well, I should have done it the whole time. And I didn't.
It's really interesting that you say that, because I almost had the same approach, except I was getting a master's in molecular biology, thinking about innovation and kind of at the molecular level. But what is way more interesting is how the molecules work together in a way that relates to life.
Right.
The psychology. And knowing that there is biochemistry behind all of that is truly remarkable and fascinating, and has a more impact on our life. You're able to impact people's lives.
Right. Right.
What can you tell us about your practice?
Sure. So I have a practice with two partners, and our practice is kind of like a law firm. It's called Nemeth, Middleton, and Phi. And I'm with two partners. One is Eva Nemeth, who's a psychiatrist, and the other is Leanne Phi, and she's a licensed professional counselor. And we've been together for almost 30 years. And we have a practice over in Cobb County here in Marietta, Georgia. And we were working at the state hospital together and running Georgia Regional's adolescent unit. So this is very public service oriented. All of us came into the psychology world with that kind of bent, very public service bent. And they were making some decisions at the state level for changing the hospital dynamic, like putting adolescents with children in the same unit. And hey, Dr. Middleton, is this a good idea? I'm like, no, this is a really, really bad idea. And so the three of us felt like at that time it was time to make some changes. And Eva had a mentor who was selling his practice, which is weird. People really don't do that much anymore. And he was moving to New York, and we decided to buy it. And Eva and I both had just had children, so it was a good time for us. And so we bought a practice together, and we've been together the whole time. Our practice is interesting. We always kind of like to talk about it as a one-stop shop, because I'm the person who specializes in children and families and adolescents. And I do all the therapy for kids, for teenagers. I do the parenting stuff. And I did psychological evaluations until just like 2 years ago. So I was doing that. And I would have interventions with the schools after those evaluations. We collaborate and figure out what are the best things that we can do for these clients. Leanne would do all of the individual therapy and all the couples work. And then Eva does all of the medication for all the patients.
Okay.
So it's kind of like a family can walk in.
It is a one-stop shop.
Yeah. And they're like, we're having marital issues. We're going to talk to Leanne. Our kids are going to see Holly. And, we're all going to get our medicine with Eva or Dr. Nemeth, Dr. Middleton.
So pretty much someone at your practice can be able to tackle most every issue.
That's right. We have certain certain areas that we don't do. Substance abuse, that's a specialty. We really want somebody to go and get some specialty work with that. Eating disorders, those things are not things that we do, because we know that there are people out there who do that well, and we think our clients really should go someplace where they're going to have some specialty work. So anyway, yeah, we've been together for a really long time. And
what type of work did you do with the schools?
So
and I say that with kind of my son was diagnosed with ADHD and dyslexia 8 years ago, and his mom had noticed that he had issues with reading from first grade, second grade, third grade, and we just could not figure out what it was. He was really bright, and retrospectively, it seems like we really just wish that the counselors at the school would have recognized and been able to say, hey, because I get the feeling that schools should stay out of the recommendation to parents. Do you know what I'm saying?
So schools can't diagnose, right?
Yeah,
so they can't say, hey, we think your kid has ADHD. But you're right. They can say, Johnny is all over the place. He really struggles to focus. He isn't sitting down. But schools have to have something that's a realistic expectation. I had a kindergarten teacher call one time and say, Dr. Holly, by the way, everyone calls me Dr. Holly. I'm not Dr. Middleton. Dr. Holly, so-and-so, this little Rosa, she can't stay on the carpet for the 45 minutes that we have, quiet time. I'm like, well, who can? She's 6 or 5. Who's going to sit on the carpet that long? So sometimes the schools don't really have the expectations that are realistic for that particular age. And that's an interesting comment, because we have to come in and find out, what are they expecting these kids to do? And maybe it's, too little or too much. So from a school perspective, what would happen is a family would come in. I would notice something's going on academically. This kid is not kind of where this kid should be in terms of reading or math, or I know that from the grades and I know that from the school reports. Has anyone tested him? No. Okay, well, let's get him tested. So I would test him, and then I would do a feedback with the family. And part of what my testing included was a trip to the school, where we would have a huge meeting, be it in the IEP meeting, that individualized education program meeting that we have for students, or another 504, which is when students get help in the classroom with their regular teacher. The difference between the IEP and the 504, you know this, but I'm going to say this for
Yeah,
people
yeah,
out there.
yeah.
The IEP requires people. So apart from the teacher. So if you have a 504, you're getting help in the classroom. The teachers that's there, that's the teacher that's helping the child. If you're getting an IEP, that means other people outside the classroom are also going to be involved. There might be a case manager. There may be a secondary teacher. There might be a pull-out situation where the kid goes to a small group, that kind of thing. So I would go to these meetings, and they'd be, crazy long, and they have this formula you have to go through, literally like 3 hours. But I'd be there because I'd say, look, are we really addressing all these different issues? So I was the person who would come in, and people used to, in the schools, would be like, oh my gosh, Dr. Holly's recommendations section. It's long because I'm like, I'm going to ask for every star in the sky. If you give me a couple, I'll be happy. But let's go.
I want to rewind
Yeah,
back
sure.
a little bit because I understand this process, but I'm wondering how does it naturally evolve for people? Like that's how it starts with you, but how does a parent or a child get brought to you to begin this process? Like
Usually what happens is the parents see that this kid is not doing well in school. And Brett, no kid wants to do poorly in school. No kid wants that. And when they start to do poorly in school and they're not making the grades they want, or they're not getting the understanding that they want, they start to act out. They either get sad, they get anxious, they might act out at home, they might have trouble going to school. And that's how it kind of starts. I remember a kid that she just stopped going to school. She was in 8th grade. Stopped going to school. And her parents were like, we don't know what's going on. Her grades are falling. Well, no one had ever diagnosed her with dyslexia. She just passed enough to go to the next grade, but she never got it. And 8th grade's hard. And you're getting ready for high school, and she just fell apart. She was like, I can't do this.
That's one of the interesting things as a parent that I never really quite appreciated. You hear of someone not doing well in school or anything really, and you're like, oh well, they're lazy or they're just not trying hard, and it's rare that happens. All
Right.
kids want to succeed, and all kids want to whatever it is they're doing, especially in school.
Right.
And it's very challenging for, at least in my case with my kids, when they're not able to do what everyone else is doing.
Right. I grew up with, my younger sister has severe dyslexia and very severe ADHD. And poor thing, I mean, she's in her mid-50s. And, she was growing up in a time where they were just like, hold her back, hold her back. And she did. She got held back, I think, twice. And it's just hard because she's like, everyone else can do this and I can't. What's going on? So that's how kids end up in my office, is because there's some kind of finally a breakdown that typically happens where they're anxious, depressed, or the focus is so bad and the parents are like, we don't know what to do. The school's not doing anything. We need help. And their pediatrician might recommend they come see me.
Is there anything that you would maybe have recognized, or that is telling or indicative that maybe something should happen before it gets to I can't handle this, or the crisis type moment? Are there like little small red flags, if you will, that might help before getting, do you know what I'm saying?
Oh, so the idea of, is there something else you could look at to find out, is this something I should even pay attention
Yeah,
to?
when a parent's like, I don't know, he's probably fine. Just work a little harder, just do a little more reading at home. Maybe I'll sit down with homework. But then something still continues to happen before getting to that, going through multiple grades and getting to the crisis. Okay, let's do something. Are there any kind of small red flags that are like, maybe we should look earlier?
For me, it's something that I think a lot of parents won't look at as something that needs attention. But if a child cannot follow just the structure of the day, that there's constant reminder to be on task, or to where's your pencil? Wait, what'd you do with your backpack? Or, if it's constantly happening, and that's something we see a lot with our kids who have ADD, right? And ADHD, by the way, for listeners, ADHD is the global name, and then there's subsets. So ADD is the inattentive subtype of ADHD. So if I say ADHD, it could be a person who has inattentive ADD. And so what I would say is, are they following the routine of the school? Do they actually do their morning work? Or do you have to constantly remind them to do the morning work? Do they get lost in the hall and you're trying to figure out what happened to them on the way to lunch? Do you find a kid starting to break down in class because they can't do something perfectly? Well, she just wants it to be perfect. And I told her it was fine and she didn't have to worry about it. Well, if I were a parent, I'd be like, yeah, I'm going to pay attention to that, because that gets in the way. And kids will do that if they feel like they don't know how to do the next thing. So they'll be like, all right, well, then I'm going to make my 4 the most perfect 4 that's ever been written, because I don't know how to do an 8. So I'm just going to do a 4, and that's the only one I'm going to do. Uh-oh, this has a bunch of 8s on it. I'm not going to do it. And you see kids really starting to back out there. So I would say looking at the daily routine of the school, or just your home, trying to just get the kid up to get out the door. Like, what does that look like? Right? Right? You're laughing. So,
Well, I laugh because I wonder. So I have 3 kids. The 2 boys have ADHD, and I'm rather confident that my daughter has ADHD, but girls present with different symptoms. So I'm wondering what what neurotypical kids are actually like, because everything you're describing just is like, yeah, that's ADHD. So seeing what normal is, I have no idea.
Right. And I think I get that. And I think it's interesting because for you, that's your normal. Like, this is what we do on a normal daily basis, is trying to rally everyone together to get them out the door, right? So that feels normal for you. And I think that's the part where teachers can see all this array of children, and they can start to go, hey, wait a second. He's really struggling to get his morning work done. He really wants to get it done. He really likes to get it done, but it's very hard for him to get it done within a certain time frame or something like that. I had a parent in the other day, and she was so frustrated because she's a high school student who can't get to school on time, driving herself to school. And she goes, what do I do about that? I said, you let her fall prey to the natural logical consequences of not getting to school on time. Because at some point, she'll have enough tardies that she'll get a suspension. And she knows that goes on her permanent record. So she understands that. But I need to work with her about time, because we know for kids who have ADD that is one of the executive functions that goes right out the window, is just a sense of time and a working memory. So it's the magic time.
Unless there's a consequence.
Right. The magic time of, I'm in my car and it's 10 o'clock, so I'm on time. No, you're actually not there, So.
It's interesting because after my son was diagnosed with ADHD, I was later diagnosed with ADHD. And then my whole life made sense.
Right.
I could look back and see why things happened.
Like, oh, I get it. Yeah.
But I had naturally gotten to the point where I had to set habits for things to happen. So daily routines, getting places on time, like I had a rhythm and I had habits to be able to do them. And I didn't realize that was critical and necessary for me having ADHD. I have alarms set to remind me to do things. And as long as I can take some time to map that out, then the alarms on my phone, the habits that I have, are how I get through the day.
But how did you feel? I'm asking, as an adult who gets diagnosed with ADD. I mean, how did it feel to finally feel like? I always think that you're trying to run the same race with a broken leg. Like, you have to do so much more. Right? You're creating these habits and these routines, and you have to set the alarms, and you have to do all these things because if you do that, that'll make it work for you, right? And I think what a lot of our kids get frustrated by is they look at their neighbor kid and they're like, he doesn't have to do all that. And that's frustrating. So we start to see that. That's another thing. You start to see the effort change where kids like, I am a smart kid, but I somehow cannot make the grade. And my friend here is doing great. And I know I'm smarter than this friend. Not to be offensive to the friend, but I really think I am.
Yeah.
And that's so frustrating. And then they stop trying. And I always say, if a kid comes home and says, it's okay, we don't need to do the extra credit. You go, wait a minute. What is it just too hard to do it? No, it feels like it's going to take forever. So they're not going to do it. And so that's a good indication to you that, wait, something's going on. Because I don't know about you, but in my life, I'm one of 5 kids. I have 4 brothers and sisters. There was no, you did the extra credit. It was like a gimme. You were going to do the extra credit. Even if you had to put polka dots on the paper, do the extra credit. So, and that was definitely the case in our house. We would say that. So it was really hard for people to,
I would do the extra credit out of a spirit of competition.
Oh, good.
Not necessarily because it was expected. One of the things that one of the things I want to talk about a little bit later is that I think that having ADHD and dyslexia are actually superpowers. Once you get to once you understand that you are going to approach things differently, it's not how do I do all this? It's, I need to tap into this superpower that I have. My kids are very creative, and I have throughout life approached problems differently in ways that were often advantageous, that a normal person would probably not think to do it that way. So I think that the creativity that untaps, I'm more inclined to encourage my kids' creativity, not worry about the fact that they're not doing the extra credit or even care about that class, but foster and encourage what they do want to do.
So let me ask you though, that requires giving them a great deal of, and thank you for doing this, it sounds like you have a great deal of confidence that they can do this alternatively in a system where they say, oh, no, we do it this way. And here they have a brain that really doesn't want to do it that way. I will get to the same result, but I really need to do it this way in my brain. And that's really hard because you have students who are getting all kinds of, oh no, you're not getting good grades and stuff. They've got to have a lot of confidence to say, that's okay, because I know this is the way my brain wants to do it, and I know I'm going to get the information. And just because I didn't fill out, the band form the way you want me to, doesn't mean I'm not a smart person. Like, that requires some sense of integrity. And so you've done a beautiful job, I guess, as a parent. I assume so, because your kids say, okay, I'm okay.
Well, I may have done well in those aspects and utterly failed with getting them as an organized type person. But it's, in today's age with YouTube and social media, it's easy to see that there's a lot of successful people, entrepreneurs, actors, creatives that have thrived with focusing on what they enjoy and what drives their passion instead of, I think, in our day, it was, you want to be successful, be a doctor, lawyer, engineer, and like those are your choices. Anything else is not, success. But now there's so much more that can be done with in everything.
I think it's so important. I was reading something recently about some research that's just come out about the fact that it's important that kids feel like they matter. And I think adults in their world can help them know that they matter, and what they do matters, and how they do it matters in a good way. Like, we care that you're doing it creatively. That's fantastic. I mean, you know the superpower of ADHD. These are people who know the 50 steps you got to take to get there. It might be hard to do the 49, but I know what that 50th thing is supposed to look like. And they get determination, and they go in different routes, and they get there in this incredibly beautiful way.
So we've almost gone from, how you initially approach a child, but we're talking more about parenting. So how much of your practice actually is counseling the parent to help the child?
So much. I don't know how many times, Brett, I've felt like saying to the kid, you're good. You graduated from therapy. Your parents, they got to stay right here. So there's so much.
What are they missing most?
I'm going to say it this way, and I mean it. Grace. give the kids some grace. Like, just this is interesting. I mean, this might help you. So I've been doing workshops for a long time and doing workshops for parenting and teachers and different things like that. And my husband and I are currently writing a book about this. And I have 4 tenets about parenting. So I do a lot of talking about listening to your kid, creating and developing a relationship with them. And that means treating them like a social equal. That means saying your math test tomorrow in 4th grade is just as important as my work meeting tomorrow. But when parents don't do that and they just say, do better to a kid, and they don't say, wait a second, let's take a look at what you've done. This is awesome. And a little bit of grace around, hey, it was just a little different today. That's okay. That doesn't mean tomorrow's not going to be super fun and maybe different. So teaching parents that they have to teach their kids how to work. Like, I can't tell you how many times parents will go, well, he just won't clean his room up. I'm like, does he know how to clean up his room? Like, it's just an assumption that he should just know. That doesn't make sense. So helping the child know that they can work by cleaning up their room and that their work matters and it matters to the family. Like, thank you so much for cleaning your room up. That's such a huge help. Thank you so much for taking your dishes to the counter. I really appreciate it.
That actually helps the overall mood of the home, I think, when there's gratitude and thanks and making them feel important, even when, and that is one of the best ways to foster, I don't want to say compliance, but like foster them to set good habits instead of nagging to do this.
Thank you.
You reinforce the positive behavior.
Exactly. Thank you. And you're teaching this amazing resilience too, because you're saying you also have to help them have emotional management. You have to say, it's okay to be upset, but how about just being upset for the rest of the day? Like we have a thing with my daughters were so funny. One time my youngest, she was in middle school and she had a boyfriend and he broke up with her. Right. Very sad. She was very upset. My oldest was driving and went to pick her up from school. And she said, give me your phone. And I guess Harry had a phone at the time. And so Claudia took the name of the boy and changed his name in her phone to whatever, I'll say his name was like, John. John is stupid. And she changed the name from John to John is stupid in the phone. And she goes, we're going to listen to Taylor Swift breakup songs on the whole way home. And you can be really upset. But then when we get home, let's decide not to be upset anymore. Because that's something I would do.
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah, I would do that with them when they were little. And so Claudia took that on. And she said it was so fun because she got super mad and upset in the 25-minute ride home. And then she got home and she goes, yeah, I feel better. I'm still sad.
That's really smart, though, because you're allowing that kind of feeling and that emotion, but you're putting a time limit on it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great with little kids. Like when they complain, I have a niece, man, she was little. She would complain all the time. I'd be like, Kendall, I'm so fine. It's so great that you're complaining. Okay, ready? You're going to have 20 seconds to complain as much as you want. Okay, go. And by 19 seconds, she's cracking up, because she realizes I contain this. I can do this thing right now. But anyway, so where were we? We were talking about parenting. Yes, I talk about parenting all the time. And I talk about emotional management. And I also talk about this, which I think is where parents sometimes struggle, is to be your kid's champion.
Yes.
Be your kid's champion. Like,
be their biggest fan, supporter.
Yeah. I have so many parents who want the kids to do what they think they should do. And I'm like, okay, you might be so great at real estate, but your son doesn't want to do that. Your son wants to be an artist, or your son wants to make perfume, or your son wants to go in the military, or whatever. Just be your kid's champion and find out what it is that they love to do and really support it. And I think that's something that I'm constantly trying to talk to parents. And that's another thing in this super social world. It isn't just kids getting on social media and feeling comparisons. Parents do it.
Yeah.
So they think their kids are supposed to do X, Y, Z because they've seen a neighbor's kid do it, or so-and-so did it, or you said, they have a definition of success.
Well, my kids and I, we just watched a movie. I forgot what it was, but one of the fundamental things that causes unhappiness one of the biggest things is comparison.
Yes.
Because if you remove the element of comparing what they should be or who may be doing better and just look at them, what they're doing, then you could be really happy. Like they're
Right.
doing really well, or they're just happy. They like what they're doing. And you don't need to compare that to
Right.
another
Another person.
standard.
Right. Because you have to stop and go, wait, based on what? Like, you're comparing it to this person, but how did you get this standard? And that's a question I ask kids all the time, but I also ask parents that. And often it's, well, when I was a kid, I'm like, 40 years ago. I mean, like, which is a totally different thing. Yes, developmentally, things are the same. Yes, kids are supposed to develop language on a certain time, and they're supposed to do certain things that happen at certain times, but they don't have to do it that way.
Yeah, I do think that, because I don't think you're saying this, but I think one hearing "be your champion, be your kid's fan" is not necessarily saying let them do whatever they want.
No. It's helping guide them to a successful path. No, they cannot do whatever they want. There's a lot of that right now with the younger parents doing a lot of gentle parenting. Do you know about this?
Oh yeah, the helicopter parenting and the
Well,
participation trophy for
oh
everything.
my gosh. So I was at a school recently doing a workshop and doing staff training, and it was a staff development day, and I was doing staff training. These teachers were so frustrated because they're like, these parents come in and they find out what the homework is, and they basically do the homework. And they call the other parents to make sure that whoever got the homework done, right? And then they'll print it out. Like if the kid forgot the homework, the parent will print out the homework so that the kid can get the homework done or whatever. And this teacher was so frustrated. She goes, I feel like the kid has no agency in making this thing happen. And she said, this kid is a smart kid who could do all that, but the parent always takes over because they want it to be done okay. And how many times parents will say, well, I just want him to get good grades because I want him to get into a really good school. And I'm like, well, so you're going to do it for him? No, that's not the point. You are missing his ability to know how to get to the good grade. You're taking that away when you do all this stuff. And this teacher was like, what do I do? How do I get so frustrated. How do I get these parents to stop doing the work for these kids? I said, okay, do you have an OG, like your original homework sheet that you've given to kids? She was like, yeah. I said, put a star at the top of it or write OG on it or something. And if the kid comes back with the original form, they get extra credit. Something
I
like
love that idea.
Something that can just say, hey, if you keep your stuff together and you get organized, I'm excited about that. That's so great. Thank you so much for doing that. So, no, I'm not saying do whatever you want. That's completely true. I'm just saying...
And I didn't think you did.
Yeah, be their champion when they come in and they have something that's, I think a better way to say it, if they have something they want to do that's different than what you think they should do, is it reasonable?
Yeah.
Do they want to do music? Okay, well, let's push that. Let's find that avenue. What could that look like for them? Because then you get the best person. That kid becomes their best self because they're living into this thing that it's just naturally what they're good at doing, which is so fun to watch.
Yeah. My daughter played soccer for a while because she thought that I liked soccer, and she enjoyed it. She had fun. But when she found marching band in high school, it was a totally different kind of attitude. Like, this is my passion and this
Absolutely.
is what I love.
I love marching band. It's such a great club. I mean, it's like, you know what it is?
Did you play?
I did not play. My husband played. And
in Texas, that's huge.
It's huge. My sister played, and it's a big deal in Texas. But I just love what it does. And especially for our kids who struggle socially, gosh, I love marching band for them because it's a small group in a big setting.
They're so tight.
And really, in all of my kids that I work with who have any kind of neurodivergency of any kind, marching band is the most accepting, fabulous, wonderful space for them to start feeling some kind of connection. So it's a great thing.
I loved it because then my daughter started asking me, what's a first down? I'm going to these football games. I need to understand what's going on.
So
I'm like,
funny.
sit down. Watch this game with me.
That's so fun. I love that. That's great. Yeah.
But it's fun watching the halftime performances,
Yeah.
and they they are so big, and they're working on, the end of the season show. So each week gets progressively bigger, and it's music. It's a way to be creative.
Yeah. This one girl came in and she brought her phone with me and she said, "Okay, Dr. Holly, that yellow dot is me. And this is me going around." And it's, this electronic cool thing, right? I thought about my husband. They had like, papers where they're like, "Okay, you stay here, you stay here." They're writing it all down on paper. And I told Ben, I said, "Yeah, they can do a whole show like electronically. And it's so fun for the kids to see their dot and watch their dot move the way it's supposed to move."
That's
and
really
it's so cool. And he looked at me, he's like, "Man, that would have been great. That would have been so much easier for me if I'd been able to do that for our band." But
so do you find neurodiverse children into more extracurriculars?
do I find them?
Yeah, are they more or less interested in school extracurriculars?
Actually, it depends on the sensory. I'll say that. Like, it depends on the sensory stuff. If it's an art club and it's quieter, and there's a lot of our kids with divergency, or they have problems with sensory integration. So they get loud sounds are too loud. They don't want to be touched, or bright lights or something like that. Like a room like this, a person who has some certain level of neurodivergency, definitely with kids that I've worked with who have autism, with a light like that, they would need to wear a cap because those lights would feel like they flicker above their heads. And so it depends on that. Like if it is something where they don't have any sensory overload, they're going to love it. It's interesting for our kids who are in band, especially marching band, they can manage that because it is outside and it feels good and they're moving around and people aren't actually touching them. So that feels really good to them. It's when things become inside, if it's too loud, or like in like what is it called? Like the flag corps or something that you do in color guard that you do inside, like on the basketball court.
Okay.
That can be a little much because of the echo and the loud and stuff like that. So you have to pay attention to that kind of stuff. But I think a lot of kids really like it. Yeah. I mean, I think they are doing some things because there's a lot of different kinds of clubs now.
Well, and there's so many ways to express creativity, and I think that's one of the superpowers, and one of the ways to kind of utilize having the symptoms of ADHD in a type of creative, productive way.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess one of the other things that I was going to ask was the comorbidity of, you said autism and ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
How are they sometimes together, and how are they sometimes different and recognized? Because I know the sensory overload I hear more with autism than I do with ADHD.
Right. Well, they're different things, right? So I would say that. Wait, try your question again. So, how are autism and ADHD?
It was 3 questions in one.
Like, wait a second. There was a bunch of questions there. Okay, Mr. Attorney, let's see. Yes.
No. It was kind of my spaghetti factory of ideas, because I think the kids that are autistic, that are ADHD, thrive with something creative.
Yes.
And some of that, the band example was a little bit too sensory overloading, but I hear sensory overload a lot with autism.
Correct.
I don't hear it as much, but it is a component with ADHD. My oldest, up until just a couple of years ago, could not listen to music loud. Like, very sensitive. Now he's fine, and then I was merging into that. What's the difference between ADHD, autism, and sometimes there's some comorbidity?
There's comorbidity.
I didn't break that apart at all. I just listed the 3 questions again.
Yeah. Do I see it? I see that. I think that's interesting, the difference with the ADHD and the sensory stuff and the autism, because I do think the kids with autism have more of the sensory stuff. The ADHD kids, if they're interested in it, they can handle it, whatever it is. For kids with autism, even if they're interested in it, if it's a sensory overload, it's a sensory overload. It's too much. But for ADHD kids, they can dive deep into something if it's what they really want to do. And it's really fun to watch. And for kids with autism, sometimes they're doing the repetitive thing because that's definition of autism. They do repetitive types of things because it gives them a sense of comfort.
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily because they could be interested, but that's not necessarily the leading reason. They might do the same thing all the time because it gives them some sense of comfort and familiarity. But for kids with ADHD, you never know. They come in and go, hey, I have decided to become completely obsessed with building, whatever, or I'm going to, whatever interests they have.
Do IEPs help with that?
Yes.
How so?
So the IEP helps with with the autism stuff, you mean?
Yeah, and finding a sense of comfort in an organized,
Yep. Yeah.
in a school
because in an
setting.
IEP, what we can do is help. I like to call it the graceful exit plan, which is a lovely thing where if a kid is getting kind of overwhelmed, is there something they can lead to? Can they leave the classroom and go someplace that's quieter, that's a little bit darker, then maybe they can calm down? Is there, like for little kids, is there a quiet corner with a little tent that they can go to? So IEPs can help because you give permission for kids to make moves out of that regular classroom into something that's going to help them feel better. I have a lot of kids who recess is not a thing they can do. I talk a lot to schools about having a quiet table outside where kids can color or something like that and let that be acceptable, because I get it that sometimes people go, well, they got to get their energy out. I'm like, but what about those kids who got completely overwhelmed and worked really, really hard to pay attention all morning long, and they just want to go and be still for a minute and have like a social regroup? They just need to go have a break. Those kids deserve that. And so sometimes in IEPs, we have to build that in to say, don't make him go outside for recess. Let her stay inside, let her color, let her help sort papers in the office or something like that. So IEPs can help because we can help place the kid throughout the day in places where they won't get overwhelmed.
Do you find parents ever reluctant to want to go through the IEP process?
Yeah, it's just long and it's arduous, and they often will say to me, well, I don't want my kid to have a label.
That's where I was, yeah.
Right?
Tell me about that.
And I'll say, if your kid had to have glasses, would you let your kid have glasses? And they say, well, yeah, of course. If your kid was diabetic, would you let them have a monitor and you have to go into the nurse's office every day and do all that to manage the diabetes? Yes. I said, well, this isn't different. I said, these are kids who something's going on, and the label isn't there to shame or judge. The label is there to help us understand what's going on so that we can have some more compassion in the space where people can go, oh, okay, this kid has to do this differently because he's got to stand at a standing desk at the back of the classroom because he needs to fidget and move around a lot. I'll get great work from him if I let him stand at the back, right? As opposed to, no, it has to be this way. So when parents resist the label like that, a lot of times it ends up not letting them have the interventions that could be really helpful.
No, I like it that you use the glasses, because I've talked to a lot of parents who are concerned about if I do the IEP, then they're going to have that label, and there's a stigma associated with a lot of mental health, not just ADHD and autism, clinical depression or
anxiety,
bipolar, schizophrenia. These are all normal, natural things that happen in the human brain, and you are removing the glasses. There's a way to manage and treat this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, fortunately, today the stigma associated with mental health is not as bad as it was 20, 30 years ago.
I agree.
And I think people are more, there's going to be that judgment, there's going to be that label, but it's less so. And you don't disadvantage your child by not getting the appropriate treatment and help.
I have a kid that a young adult that I'm working with, and she is so funny because she's doing some kind of big long-term project in her job, and it required just a lot of organizing and things like that. And she's been off of the medication she's been taking for ADHD. She's been off of it for 5 years by her own choice because she got into a field she likes. She felt more organized. She had her routines down. She was doing these things. But this project has been really, really hard. And she got into that place that often would happen for her where she got frozen. Just like, I can't get started. Like we know with kids with ADHD, The big problem is they don't get started, get going, get moving, get finished, but she couldn't get started. She couldn't do the things she needed to do this project. So we talked, and I said, do you happen to have any more of your medication? That living is it current? Is we need it to be current? She said, yes, I do. And I said, do you think you might want to just try taking it? Because for traditional prescriptive ADHD medication, just so listeners know this, it's in and out of your system in a day. So you take it, and the day you take it is the day that it works. So I said, if you have it, maybe just try and see what you think. So she took it for a week, and I called. We had another session. She goes, oh my gosh, Dr. Holly. She goes, do people always feel like this? I mean, do people just get up and do stuff? I can't believe this. She goes, I just can't believe that I got up. I did 8 pages on that thing. I did a load of laundry before I left for work, and I actually made myself a lunch for work. And I'm like, wow, this is great. She goes, I felt like I was back in high school for a minute. And she goes, and now I feel in her mid to late 20s, I feel much better. And she said, this is what she said. Okay, this is great. I think I'll take it for a couple of weeks, and then I won't. I said, hold on. Can I ask you a question? Like, why would you stop it? I said, because you just told me that you put glasses on your brain and the world was clear. And you did it more smoothly. You got stuff done. It made more sense for you. You just said that you did that. And now you're telling me that we're going to not do that. Like, what do you think? And she was like, yeah, I guess. I said, if you had glasses, would you leave your house without your glasses on? She was like, no. I said, you wouldn't drive without your glasses, right? No. I said, I'm just saying this might be something to consider. And you'll be happy to know, Brett, that I also said to her, and I have another product that I really want you to look at. So I led her down the path to Accentrate, which is exciting.
Well, there's a couple things I want to unpack there, because medication absolutely plays a role with mental health these days, because the world that we have been living in for the last, well, let's just go 50 years, is a radically different one than the last 100,000 years.
Right.
For thousands of years, we did not sit in a school doing homework and reading, or go to a job and sit in front of a computer, or any of the tasks that we're doing right now. And some people's brains, to feel normal, to be able to do that, definitely need medication.
Yeah.
And I think when my son was diagnosed, we weren't opposed to medication, but we wanted to make sure that he had all of the nutrients that humans have been evolved to eat all this time, because we're not eating the food that we used to eat. We don't eat vegetables. We eat little fish. It's all pizza, chicken nuggets, instant meals and stuff. So we started with the nutrition approach to cover those bases.
Absolutely.
But the medication helps in a modern world today that is different than what we've had.
Right. I agree. And I want to come back to that nutrition part, if you don't mind.
How does nutrition play a role?
Okay. My daughters and I are doing a different project. We call it Kitchen Table Therapy. And it is going to be a book, but it's talking about, in my opinion, unfortunately, the food security problem we have even in populations of kids where there's a lot of resource. Because what's going on, and these kids aren't performing well, but part of it is because parents have said, well, pick up dinner at Zaxby's on your way home. Sorry, Zaxby's, but yeah. And
I've never had that said to me at all, ever.
Right? And so, but then what happens is the kid's in charge of making sure they eat throughout the day, because people are busy, people have work, or maybe there's sports or different things like that. So there's not this sense of, first of all, being fed. Having somebody make a meal for you, period, is just such a moment of, like, you feel cared for and you feel like you matter. And if you're a kid, that feels really great. Like, somebody made me a meal. That feels really good. So when we opt out of that, if a parent opts out of that and just says it's too much trouble and there's Uber Eats and you can, do whatever, then you miss that opportunity to feed the kid, but you also miss the opportunity to actually feed and listen to the kid.
What if you ask, what do you want from Uber Eats?
But are you sitting and eating with?
No,
but that's my point. Is that we have a lot of times where families, there's no gathering.
Yeah.
There's no connecting, so we don't know how this kid is feeling in school, and then we're all of a sudden shocked that this kid's felt anxious and depressed. Well, have we been paying attention? Have we had any conversations? Well, he doesn't talk to me. He's always in his room playing video games. Okay, well, go sit in there. Just sit on the floor in his room and do your own thing. And eventually that kid's going to talk to you, right? It's just the connecting. It's this idea of the kitchen table therapy, I call it, where we're around it, we're talking. You don't have to eat. You don't even have to make a meal. But how do you get people together and gather? I have this one mother that I work with. She has 3 boys. Oh, they are all over the place. Athletics, lots of different things they're doing. And she has figured it out. It's cool. Because she said, I figured out that everyone is home at around 9 p.m. They're kind of high school kids.
Yeah.
So we have a, quote, dessert at 9 o'clock.
Oh, my kids would love that idea.
Yeah. And she goes, and sometimes it's yogurt, sometimes it's, fruit, sometimes it's full on dessert, something. But we have dessert at 9 o'clock. And we gather there at 9, and that's what we do for like 20, 30 minutes. And if kids say, well, I have homework or whatever, I go, that's fine, but we're just going to sit and be for a minute and be together. So the nutrition part of it is so key. Like I ask a lot about protein and are they getting enough vegetables and do people eat fruit? And for some of our kids with neurodivergence, they're picky. And some of our ADHD kids, they're picky eaters. The textures, the stuff bothers them. So how do we come up with the nutrients that they need? How do we make sure they're getting what they need? And oftentimes that means you have to, as a parent, pay attention to their food. And if you're not doing that, you don't be surprised when your football player's son passes out on the football field. He has as we say in Texas, because it's really hot there, you're going to hydrate or dihydrate. Like, I'm sorry, you got to figure this one out. So, or in band. Or band in the summer where, you're so concerned, like just being aware of what they're putting in their bodies and do they have enough water, all that kind of stuff.
I had to trick my kids for a long time. What got me into a lot of the nutrition aspect, I was a patent attorney writing patent applications for a specific DHA from enriched eggs. And so in doing that deep dive, it was like, oh, DHA in the phospholipid form has a greater uptake to the brain than DHA from some types of fish oil supplements. And so what I would do is, at the time, and this doesn't even exist anymore, but Kroger had enriched eggs that had 660 milligrams of omega-3 fatty acids in a single egg. Mm-hmm. So I would, I would hard boil them, separate the yolk from the white, and put them in the freezer until I had like 30 yolks. Then I would dehydrate them and put them in the blender. So I had this like golden yellow powder that I just put in muffin mixes, pancake mixes.
So
throw it in with ground flax.
I love that.
Flax seed. And so they were having normal-ish food, but adding in the omega-3s because they weren't going to eat fish. And It's really hard to find EPA or DHA that's not from fish, like the plant-based sources that we hear, almonds, seeds, but that's a lot of ALA. It's not the polyunsaturated fatty acids that you need. So I've been tricking them for years.
Well, that brings up another kind of personal point for me, which is I agree with the tricking part, but I have celiac disease, and my daughter Harriet has celiac disease, my youngest. And I didn't know I had celiac disease until I had Harriet because she was born with a rash. And the doctors were like, oh, she has asthma. Well, my youngest sister has asthma. And I'm like, this is not asthma. Like, I'm pretty sure there's something else going on. And it took, within her first year, it took a while because all the formula had wheat in it. She can't do soy. So I finally landed on goat's milk for her,
Oh, wow.
That, just so she'd be able to eat something.
Yeah.
So she and I got tested, and our numbers were ridiculous. And the other two in our family, they were fine. So 22, 23 years ago, I had to come up with gluten-free food. Huh. And do you know how horrible the gluten-free
That was
bread.
before anyone
It
knew
was
what gluten
so
was.
bad. And I'm like, I got to find stuff for Harry to eat. So we flooded our kitchen table with like fruits and vegetables and different things like that because there couldn't be bread or pasta or
Hmm.
crackers. You know, none of that was going to show up. And
That just sounds sad to me.
but it's so much better now.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it's such a beautiful thing. And in my mind, this is really hopeful for our families because even the products like that we have here that you have at Phoenix Accentrate, these are hopeful products because they're offering some other kinds of opportunities for kids to get the things that they need. I mean, Harriet was really little. We'd go to restaurants and we'd order something and she'd be like, "Excuse me, is this gluten free?" I mean, like she was really good at that, and now she's an expert at it because that's her life. That's how she lives.
And I would hope that now we've come so far that it's now on the menu. Like
It is.
it is easier to accommodate that
It
kind of
is, and you can
sensitivity.
ask people, and people still don't understand it, and you can say, "Is this gluten free?" Yes, it is, but it has soy in it. I'm like, okay, so not, but it forced the idea of I really need you to like salmon or I really need you
Yeah.
like because we don't have a lot of options. Oh my gosh, this was funny. Harriet said the other day, she said, "Yeah, I was explaining our house growing up, Mom, to some friends of mine, and I said, yeah, I grew up in an ingredient only home." I'm like, I never even heard that before. She's like, "Yeah, though, if you wanted a cookie, we had to make it. We had to make a gluten-free cookie, and we would find these, flours at different places. And now you can get a gluten-free flour blend, which is really exciting. And so I love the hopefulness of it. It's like so fun to look at that.
Well, I think one of the advantages in doing that is in tackling and taking accountability and responsibility for your own nutrition. You can find what works.
Right.
Like if you go to a restaurant, they may have 2 or 3 seafood meals, but none of them are going to be as good as the pan-seared salmon that I make my kids. They'll eat
Yeah.
that all the time because the way the dry rub is, they love that seasoning.
Right.
And there's many other ways you could do it, but you have to you kind of have to play with it and figure out what works and what your kids will eat.
But notice something you're doing. You're making a lot of effort to do this in a really beautiful, loving way. You're saying, I really want them to have this in their bodies. And I know it might be more work on my part to figure out, and do this secret, sneaky little dehydration of eggs. And I mean, by the way, I love that. I might steal that. That's great. Um, you're really thinking this through. And I think that's the part where we get to tell parents, we need to enable them and say, it's a joy to do that. And you will be so excited about your children when you realize you are having a pretty big impact on their nutrition. They're sleeping well. Like, if kids are cranky, I want to know, have they had enough sleep? Have they had enough to eat? Have they had enough water? Like, I want to know those things first. I don't.
It's funny how basic that is.
That's so basic.
It's like that's
yeah.
just normal living, but we live in an age
Right.
where it's all messed up.
Right.
It gets out of whack, and you're like, "Oh, I'm really not feeling well." Well, you're sleeping. No, but
Right.
so okay,
Right.
sleep.
So sleeping would be good. I mean, the joke in our house is if you come in with a crisis or whatever, I'm always like, should I make you a quesadilla? Like, I'm always like making people quesadillas or something like that. And I think it's important to be like, okay, well, let's make sure you're getting all the basics that your body needs to just function.
Well, one of the first things in improving, like countries that have been in poverty for centuries, are typically malnourished. And one of the first things that developed countries have done to try and help third world countries is let's get them proper nutrients, proper health. And while it is thinking a lot about my kids, it started selfishly. Like I had a genetics teacher in college that was like, if you live long enough, you will get cancer. I mean,
Wow.
cancer is having mutations in your cells that then give rise to tumors, and your body has ways of dealing with them and repairing the DNA. But if you live long enough, you're going to accumulate some. I mean, for some people, it's going to be really long.
Mm-hmm.
But that was like, okay, I would like to live 90, 100,
Yeah.
So eventually I'll get it maybe. But he said if you don't want to get cancer, eat broccoli and leafy green vegetables because of the nutrients in them that help fight that. And in college, I was like, okay, I guess I'm gonna start eating vegetables.
That's
I guess
so
I'm gonna
disciplined. I love that.
start eating salads now. And I love salads. I
Yeah.
love vegetables. And it takes a while to actually like it. There was a video that I saw of, they were interviewing kids in Japan, and they asked a kid in Japan, what's your favorite food? This is legit and real. Broccoli and rice.
I believe that.
Because they don't get fed all this garbage. But if
Have you seen those shows where the kids, the Japanese kids, it's just so cool. So like in school, they have a big tray that comes in from the cafeteria, and it's like noodles or rice or vegetables or whatever. And the kids like do family style. They go and serve the other kids, and they're eating this incredibly beautiful stuff. And I'm like, oh, that's amazing. That is really, really great. And so that's the thing. Like with Harriet, I had to make her lunch every day until she could make it herself. I could never trust that anyone was going to be making something that was gluten-free or nutritious that was going to get her through the day. So there was always, and I mean, we were on a supplement train from the beginning of time to make sure that she had what she needed and that I had what I needed to get through the day and to get through the day without falling asleep. So.
Well, making meals every day, that definitely is going to communicate also that you care.
Yes.
And that definitely helps with.
And it teaches them that they can do it too, right? So, and it kind of is, it's a great way of helping kids feel included in the family system. And especially if there's something they do really well. Like there's this girl that I work with, and she's been watching enough like YouTube or TikTok or something to know how to do charcuterie boards really interesting ways, right? So she loves to like make a charcuterie board, and it could be fruit or vegetables or like whatever, right? So she's in 7th grade, I think, and her mother likes to be in control of the kitchen. So mom wasn't giving up any area of the kitchen. And this girl was showing me stuff, and if you do it this way, and if you put this in a wine glass and you turn it upside down, this cool stuff happens. And then so I said to mom, I'm like, do you think we could like let her be like the appetizer queen or something like that? Could you just like allow
I didn't even know what that word was till I was like 38.
I know. I mean, can we allow her this moment of having some, competence area where this is, well, why don't we get her to make that? And that way, this mom later on, when people are coming over, she can say to the girl, hey, Julie, would you please make your famous charcuterie? Now Julie has a famous charcuterie board that she's now owning, which is so cool.
But that also sounds like encouraging what they like.
Right. The being the champion. This is like, this is that whole thing of like, exactly.
And it's fascinating to me that can be as simple as encouraging a child to get into making a I can't even say
a charcuterie board.
I know what it is. I can order them very well. But just doing something simple like that.
Right.
There's definitely a niche for everyone.
There is, and it's so fun to find out what people like to do. We have these gluten-free brownies that we make on very special occasions. They take forever because with gluten-free batter, in case you're gluten-free, if you have a gluten-free batter, it's got to sit for a minute before you cook it. If it's a dough, it has to go in the fridge for an hour or two before you cook it.
Why is that?
Look, you're the scientist. You'll have to tell me.
I haven't looked at that.
I don't know.
I've never had to cook that way.
All I'm saying is somehow things congeal and they're better, and you have to do that. Otherwise, it runs all over the place. Anyway, so Harriet made these brownies one time, and I know how to make the brownies. Everyone in our family can make the brownies. You read the recipe, you can make the brownies. But she made the brownies, and when we had another thing come up, it was like Easter or something. She was like in 6th grade. She goes, Mom, do you want me to make my brownies for you guys? And I said, yes, absolutely. And so literally to this day, no one makes the brownies but Harriet. It's like, Harriet's going to make her brownies. Like,
Harriet's brownies.
It's Harriet's brownies. And so I love that idea of just, this is her competence area. We know she's good at that. And then she became famous for that. She was in college and people were like, oh my gosh, Harriet, are you going to bring your brownies? And she's like, okay, well, it takes a long time. I need a whole Saturday afternoon to make these things because they, take forever to sit and cook and like whatever. But I love that. And that she took that on. And I was so happy that I was paying attention in that moment and allowed her to keep it, So But I think that's a fun thing to find out. Like, what does your kid love to do? And then sort of assign it to them. Like, if they're expert salad makers, oh my gosh, could you please make one of your famous salads? You know?
Is there any kind of nutrient or food that is makes the biggest difference? Obviously, if you have celiac disease, going gluten free is going to have a huge difference. Are there any other changes that are?
Well, for us, for just so in general, protein. For most people on the planet, it's protein. I don't care how you get it. Get it through your leafy greens or whatever. If we take a look at that for our kids, I guess you know that more than I do, but of just especially our kids with attention and being able to focus, the protein seems to be pretty helpful, but not in weird amounts and not in weird ways. Like, just make sure they're getting it, because a lot of our kids that I work with, they want just snacks and sugar and whatever. I mean,
No, I agree,
yeah,
and I think a lot of times when people hear protein, they're thinking meat, and while that is a way
is
of
a
getting
source.
there are a lot of other ways of getting protein.
Yeah,
But if you think about a typical trip to Chick-fil-A or any, we said Zaxby's, any fast food, any of what people are eating, it's mostly carbohydrates.
right.
So
That's true.
getting good sources of protein, healthy fats. And I think one of the things that we're starting to come back from is that we've been saying fats are bad for so long.
Right.
And now it's even the fat that's stored, it's not bad.
Right.
It's actually the carbs that are increasing the blood sugar levels that are causing more of the obesity than eating fat is.
That's right.
Um,
I would say too, and maybe you can help me with this, because I'm thinking about one of the products that Phoenix has that's a really helpful product for me, and it's been really helpful for Harriet, is like methylfolate, the B vitamin kind of area. Like, that feels like a really important area because, right? I mean,
so I have the most ADHD career that you could have. The first patent application that I worked on for a client had his excuse me, his wife had a thyroid issue, and so she was taking some thyroid medication during her pregnancy, and it blocked folate metabolism. So his kids were born with an issue no one could identify until 5 years. The kids were 5 years old, and they realized that the cerebral spinal folate levels were low. So they started taking L-methylfolate, which is the active form of folate, and they almost came back like overnight.
wow.
So I've been working with folate. So L-methylfolate is the form of folate that crosses the blood-brain barrier. I think that's probably one of the most known nutrients because it's heavily emphasized when a woman's pregnant.
Right.
Folate is required for neurotube development. It's in leafy green vegetables, even some red meats. Like, it's a very important molecule that runs the folate cycle, and a lot of bad things happen if you don't get folate. And so much so that we've fortified a lot of our foods with folic acid.
Oh, I
So
see. Yes. Okay.
one of the interesting things is some people have genes that make metabolizing folic acid into the usable form of folate. They can't do it. So in Accentrate, we put the active form of L-methylfolate, which is the form that crosses the blood-brain barrier. And really, like, all of the ingredients that are in Accentrate are the forms that the body can use.
Right.
And the ones that are most important for dopamine regulation, for serotonin regulation, because it was specifically targeted to help my son and with mental for mental health.
Yeah.
And I forgot where your question was. You
Well,
said
no, but I said
methylfolate.
no, but I because I'm thinking about the Neuro 110 product that
Yeah.
I have, and the reason I'm asking about the methylfolate is because I think I'm pretty sure my physician said to me, I was going to a naturopath. That's the thing. I've had to do lots of different things in my life because I was really sick for a long time when I was younger, and I didn't know why. And so we went to all kinds of different people to try to figure things out. but they were talking about how the B vitamins are binding, in like them breads and stuff like that. We don't get that.
Yeah.
And so I did one of those gene tests. They have like the gene test that came into the person that came into our office, and they were like, well, we need somebody in your office to do that. And my partners were like, Holly will do it. Like, she needs to do it.
That was one of the things I was going to ask, because there's gene tests, there's food allergy tests.
So we did the
How
gene
many
test.
of those are a part of your practice?
So we used to do the gene testing called Gene Sight. I'm not sure if it's we used to do that, and that is something that has to be prescribed by Eva, because she's the MD in the practice.
Oh, okay.
And she decided not to do it anymore. So we haven't done that part of it in a while. And I don't know that company is, I'm sorry, I'm not sure if that company is still in its same form.
There are many like that,
right.
if they've been bought out.
But we did do that for a little while, which is helpful. And we now know that we have a lot of their practitioners that are their regular primary people can get those tests. And we like those. Those are good. And it really helps Eva, Dr. Nemeth, come up with the right kind of medication protocol, I think. So for me, when we did that thing, it came up that I was desperately low in the methylfolate area, which meant Harriet probably was too. And so that's when I started way back then I would do the methylfolate. We would take all that, the 400 milligrams of whatever. And so I was really happy to see that in one of your products, because I think it's helpful. I mean, it helps with energy.
Yeah. We go to a convention, Psych Congress, which is for all mental health issues, and it's mostly in the expo hall. It's for psychiatrists, clinicians, neurologists, and there's an expo hall where, vendors can come, and it's mostly all pharma. We're one of the few supplement companies that are there, but there was a company that does a gene test that helps for all medications.
Right, and that's what this one did.
Yeah, so it's like
if you pain meds, it did like the whole thing.
Yeah,
it was really helpful.
I mean, technology is only going to be getting better. Help getting people the specific medicine and nutrition they need
faster, and get it to them. Like, we don't have to go through these try this. I mean, for so many patients, that's so frustrating. They'll try a medication and it doesn't work, or they feel worse, or whatever, or they could be an opposite performer. Like, my dad, and I guess me too. I mean, I had kids, and they would give me over-the-counter Motrin. Like, they were like, you can't take anything bigger than that, because you're supposed to be awake after you have a kid. I'm like, oh, okay, so. But my dad, after my mom died, he was really sad, and they gave him an antidepressant, and he was suicidal in 2 days. So it's like this is such a great thing to have a gene test, because then you could say, oh, don't give him that.
Yeah.
That's not marked for him. I mean, he needs this instead.
And there are other things that help with that mood.
100%. Yeah.
And we've formulated Accentrate originally for my son who has ADHD, but as people have been taking it, we hear back from doctors and from customers, and we've changed things over time. So I was at a conference for the American Academy of Pediatrics, and Dr. Arnold came up to me and he was like, I really like that you've got folate here, the B6, the B12, but did you know that you really need kind of all of the B vitamins? And there's this paper, but I think Kennedy was the author, that basically kind of describes how all of the B vitamins work in kind of a concert.
Oh, okay.
And so if you're deficient in B1, it doesn't matter if you're getting the full amount of B6, folate, B6, B12. That'll all be helpful, but you're going to have this cog in the wheel. So you really need to be able to make sure that they're taking all of them. So we've changed the formulation a handful of times. We found out there was such a thing as overmethylators. So people are very sensitive to methylcobalamin and L-methylfolate.
Uh-huh.
So, it's so tricky, because some of our best transformative cases were kids with autism, that they got the folate and the methylcobalamin, and they were doing amazingly well, like after just 4 weeks. But others, those methyl groups, like, made them get very anxious. So we've kind of had to change it and go to a different B vitamin that was active. We changed it to adenosylcobalamin and hydroxycobalamin, and overnight, all of the issues with anxiety went away, because it was no longer affecting those that were over methylators. And with the new product line that we have, we've gone to a more personalized nutrition because everyone is different.
It feels that way.
And we initially made the change because, again, I put this together for my son. I take it, and we prided ourselves in having the most bioavailable ingredients, whether it's folate or whether it's methylcobalamin or whether it's the omega-3 fatty acids. And there was a study in 2019 that showed that there was an even more bioavailable omega-3 fatty acid to the brain. So it's like, great, okay.
Here we go.
We thought we put everything together, but the only consolation package to that is that the ingredient didn't exist.
Yeah.
So you couldn't buy it on the market. And our supplier had been working on it, and we redid the whole thing last fall because that ingredient was so important. And
how'd you find it?
so I started reaching out to many ingredient companies in Europe. Can you make this ingredient? They came back and they're like, we don't think it's going to be a stable ingredient. Looked at some other companies, seeing if they were making it. I put into a Google alert for the name of the molecule, lysophosphatidyl-choline, and I want to say it was...
Yeah, see if you can spell that 15 times. That's a big mouthful.
I still can't even spell it with spell check on, lysophosphatidyl-choline. But I got a Google alert saying that the company that we were buying, Aker BioMarine, that's where we sourced our phospholipid omega-3 fatty acids, was developing it. And it took them... It took a while to get it done. We've been wanting to have Lysoveta in Accentrate since 2020. And so to launch 4 years later, it was like really a marathon getting across the finish line. But that is the most...
Congratulations, because I think it's great. And I have,
Thank you.
I have some patients that are taking it and they're reporting back really exciting things for them, that it's, lowering daily anxiety, that sort of drum anxiety that kind of happens in their lives. It's brain fog is lifting, which is lovely. It helps me with energy in the afternoon. Like if I eat anything in the middle of the day, my whole body goes, okay, we're going to digest now. All right. I don't know what else you're going to do, Holly, but you can't do anything else because we have to digest. So it's lovely because it's allowing my brain to do some other stuff too and not have to just digest food. So I don't get sleepy in the afternoon, which is really a hallmark for me, I have to say. So, but yeah, I think I've seen some stuff that's been happening in patients that are really dead set on telling you that nothing's working because they're really committed to being the patient, right? Those are those ones that are just like, they just like the idea of being anxious or depressed and want to take it on as a moniker.
It's giving them their daily adrenaline.
It's their daily thing. I love it. Even those patients are saying, yeah, this has been helpful for me. So that's been, I think it's pretty exciting. So I love it.
Well, so there was a pediatrician in Fort Worth, Texas, that I was talking to that said he liked omega-3s in nutrition because he likes recommending medication that works while you're sleeping. Because as you said, medication is typically, it works for the day, then the body metabolizes it.
And it, by the way, doesn't work when you're studying for the test at 8:30 at night or 9 o'clock at night. It's not working anymore.
Yeah. But the omega-3s are the literal building blocks. They are the components of the neurons, the neuronal walls. So we are very excited to be the first in the country selling this ingredient, and it's too bad, or it should be an option instead of, if someone passes away and you start going into a depression, instead of going to some drug that gives you suicidal tendencies within 2 days.
It should be an offered option. It should be an offered option. And that's the part that's difficult, is to help. People have to work harder at getting those offered. I mean, it should be something that you can say is out there and it is an option and it's a viable, good option for you. So I agree. And, that's one thing I think about our practice that's been great. We are definitely a holistic looking group. I mean, we did wraparound services way back in the day, and we still do that. And we do that even with recommendations. So even though Dr. Nemeth is somebody who prescribes medication as a psychiatrist, that doesn't mean she always does, and it doesn't mean she pushes it. Most of the people that we work with will say, consult with her, find out what the options could be. And in that option conversation, she's going to offer these other things because she knows that they have worked for so many of our patients, because we also have been that group of people who's been able to take on some pretty difficult patients who have hard diagnoses, who you can't quite figure out what's going on. And they show up and there's lots of different things happening. So when you offer these different kinds of options, you give them some hope.
And people that do eat sushi and fish and vegetables and salads, they still have
mental illness
issues, and supplements are probably not going to help them. It's going to be something else that's contributing to that, unless they have a genetic issue that impairs absorption or metabolism of an ingredient. And it's a very tricky puzzle.
It is.
And it takes a practice that can comprehensively look at all different factors and components.
It also, I feel like it also takes, we're really okay saying we don't know. Like, we are really okay with that.
Nobody likes to hear that.
Right. But we can
I've come to my doctor. I need an answer.
Right. And it's okay to say, I don't know, but I sure do want to find out with you. Like, let's figure out some different ways to go, different things we can try to do. And learning, like, what is in your internal locus of control? What's in your external locus of, what can you control? What can you affect right now? And where are the questions that we still have? And we may not know the answer right this second, but hey, let's get you connected with so-and-so. That's another thing that I think our practice does well, is that we collaborate well. Like, we don't know, but we think this person might know. So go talk to them.
In taking all these different data points, what has changed most over time as you practiced?
I think for me, it is being open to options, like being very aware that there are lots of different ways to get to the result. Like, and maybe I need to be paying attention to that. My clients, I think they've grown up with me. So I have families where, I've seen the kids and they've grown up and now they're adults and maybe they're having kids, which is kind of scary and crazy. And then I'll see the parents, and then I do see a lot of adults now, individual adults that tended to be either the parents of the kids I saw or they referred somebody over. So everything has grown up a bit. But I think the other thing that's happening for me is it's a message that I love my 8 people a day, or however many I see. They're great. I love my clients. But I would love to get the message of helping kids and helping parents feel like they're successful parents. I'd love for that message to get out to more people. So I find myself, I love doing my workshops. I love talking to parents and doing workshops with teachers and educating them, that kind of thing.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to start doing podcasts and doing more content and getting stuff out there, because we have customers that we want to help more than what I think we have been able to in the past. And when we were talking about doing a podcast, you had asked us what is the name of the podcast, and I hadn't really thought that far. It was, we'll just post it on our YouTube channel and our Instagram channel, but like, we do have a lot of other doctors and scientists that we're going to be talking to in the next few months. So we probably will organize this under a podcast name. And if there are any listeners that have ideas for podcast names, in the comments.
Yes.
But if you have any ideas, we're all open.
I mean,
for
it's got to be something fun, right? I mean, because this can be a really serious topic, but it can also be really lovely and fun to talk about this hopeful rise of children and people. So I thought you should say Phoenix Rising, because that's happens, and it's just a play on the word.
I do like that.
So we'll see. But I think your listeners, they can come up with some other ideas, which would be great, because it's fun to have a podcast that is going to bring some people in, because your name says it's going to be something fun to listen to. Because if it's super serious all the time, that's not going to be great. And this isn't. This is fun because you get to talk about cases and stuff like that.
Well, and I was talking with my youngest when dropped him off for school today. He really likes the idea of something transformative, and he was like, a
Mm,
phoenix is transformative, so you need to keep it transformative. If you change it
I like
something from
that.
phoenix, because I think you go through life and your old paradigm sometimes is just utterly shattered, and that transition can be painful, but what rises from that,
Mm-hmm.
which is why I really like your
Mm-hmm.
suggestion, can be even better.
Yes.
Hopefully should be. If you learn
Right.
from the pain,
Right.
you're going to
Right.
go through it again.
And it's just really believing in evolution, like that things evolve, and that's the part that changing your mindset. You don't have to have a fixed mindset of it's always going to be this way. No, it can get better, and there are products that can help it get better for you. There are ways of doing it that can be better. You can do it creatively if that's the way you do it, and I think it's exciting for kids to realize that there isn't a one way, or parents that there isn't a one way, that there's something and it can be different
That makes it
from
really
how,
hard.
yeah, and it can be different from how they grew up, you know. I mean, I think about us growing up. I mean, I'm one of five, and I have to.
Where do you fall in that?
I'm the fourth,
Okay.
and
I'm the oldest of five. That's why I wanted to
okay,
ask.
great. See, this is great. And I just remember when my dad was really old and he was in a nursing home and he was still cognizant. We could talk about stuff, and I was saying something about how, yeah, on Saturday, I'd put on I'd get my backpack or whatever, and I'd get on my bike. No helmet, back then. I'd get on my bike because we didn't have helmets. This is from when the earth cooled, right? So, and I'd ride my bike over to North Star Mall from our house. And he went, "What? We let you ride your bike to North Star Mall?" I'm like, "Dad, you didn't know where I was half the time. We would just leave. You told us to leave and go outside and get air, and we would go and do whatever." And I said, "We turned out okay." He goes, "I can't believe you're still living and walking around. I can't believe we let you do that." I said, "I'm not going to tell you about some of the other stuff you let us do that you didn't know about." But I think parents are, like you talked about the helicopter parent, they're so concerned about their kids, and they're so concerned about this world and all the things that their kids are doing that they can't control, like social media and stuff. So they're worried, and it's nice to have some hopeful messages.
It is good to worry, but also there has to be room to grow.
Yeah.
And sometimes getting hurt is okay. Like my my son was at a soccer game and he got knocked down, like really hit hard. And I'm just sitting there, the parents to the side of me who are good friends, like they're like, "Is he okay?" Showing significantly more concern. One parent ran around the field to check on him. And when he got up and walked off the field, he was like, "No, coach, I want to keep playing." I'm like, that's my point.
Yeah.
Like, I want him to be able to experience, like, I can get up without I got knocked down, but also he has broken his arm on the field, and I rushed over there because that was different. So
Right.
it's really hard as a parent to be like, where do I step in and help and be there, and where do I just sit on the sideline and let him get up on his own?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's tricky because
Yeah, it is tricky.
you sometimes guess wrong.
Yeah, that's true. And I think also it's important to ask, is there something I can do to be helpful right now, especially when they get older? Because you don't stop parenting your kids. Even if they're grown or whatever, they still need you, and you still need to offer that up. And it's hard to know that line too.
So we were watching a Spider-Man movie, and I would butcher the line, but it was the animated one. And he's having a moment where he wants to tell, I think, he wants to tell his parents that he's Spider-Man, and he doesn't find it, like, he can't. I forget why, but he doesn't want to let them down, or he doesn't want them to know. After the movie, I told my kids, I was like, look, if there's something that you have to tell me, you need to just tell me this is a Spider-Man moment. Like,
I love that.
turn
I love
off
it.
whatever switches you have right now. I need you right here.
Yeah.
And that kind of helps set me up. And that has totally worked.
I love that.
I went in just thinking it was a normal day, checking in on my daughter before she went to bed. And she was like, I just need to be alone right now. Message received.
Got it.
Like, I'm out. And she was fine, but she needed space. And I think sometimes when you want to help, you get really in there and let me solve this problem, or what is it, interrogative mode. And sometimes just space is what they need. Time off.
And they also need, for those who always want to know, our more anxious kids who have to have reassurance and they keep asking for help, tell me what to do. Saying, no, I believe in you. I know that you can think about this and process it and come up with something and think about it. And then we'll get back later to talk about it. That's another message that
is a great message. And it's sometimes hard to actually say.
Yes.
because
you're like, do I believe in this? I don't know. Like,
yeah. Like, I really hope you do.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. But
and I'll be there to help clean up the mess if you don't. But I do believe in you.
Yes, exactly.
Put on my poker face.
That's exactly right. That's so funny. That's good.
Most times they're smart, but dumb ideas do arise.
Dumb ideas do arise. I had a kid.
That's the name of the podcast.
Yeah, dumb ideas do arise. That's a good one. I had a kid say that he and his buddies in middle school. I love middle school boys because they're hilarious. They're just so funny.
You may be the only person that's ever said that.
I mean, they're just so great. They come up with the craziest ideas that they truly think are great ideas. Like, I have this great idea. We're going to go do midnight bowling with my buddies and I. We're going to go midnight bowling, and mom's going to take us to midnight bowling and come back and pick us up at 2 a.m. I said, wait, can we stop there for a second? The whole thing about mom dropping you off and picking you up at midnight and then at 2 to a midnight bowling place that you'd never been to before. Well, so-and-so's brother told us about it. I said, and his brother's how old? I mean, it's just, and how they get themselves into these things. It's so much fun. And
prefrontal cortex doesn't develop till they're 25.
Oh, no. And it's so funny. And they're like, I just am always like, yeah, I don't know about that idea. We'll see how that works out. This is when the parents are like, no, you're not going to, and they get really mad. I'm like, just sit down with them and go, okay, this is what I used to do with the kids. I mean, okay, let me see if I understand this. And I say it like that. And then they'd be like, oh, God, she thinks it's a bad idea. Because that was my cue for, I'm not sure I think this is a great plan, but let me see if I understand this. We walk this through. And the mother's like, I just yelled at him. I said, yeah, that won't go anywhere. But if you stop, say, think this through, you might be starting a frontal lobe movement. Yeah.
Now, one of the things that I noticed, so my dad probably highly likely had ADHD. His sister was recently diagnosed within the last 5 years at over 70 as having ADHD.
Oh, wow.
But one of the things that I think people with ADHD struggle with sometimes is managing emotions.
Yes.
And so I had a great father, but sometimes had a hard time managing emotions. And I think for me personally, if some of his counsel were in a calmer tone, it would have been better received.
Correct.
So, I mean, I'm human too. I want to yell at my kids. I'm hurt, upset, and I just have to try and take a pause. This message can wait.
Yes.
I don't have to address this issue right now.
That is so powerful and important.
Because if I tell them the exact same thing without an angry tone,
a lot of good things can happen.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm telling you, it's okay to wait to respond. I mean, absolutely. It's okay to come back to behavior and say, hey, I need to say something else about this, or I need to say something about this. It's okay to do that. It's okay to let your kids do that. Because you're right. You're so right. It's the how you say it that matters. And oftentimes people will leave my office and go, will you just come home with me and say it that way? I'm like, no, you can't. I'm going to teach you how to say this in a way that's supportive and kind, and clear. Clear as kind, as Brene Brown would say. And so how do you do that? And I think, but that's really true. That's really true.
It's hard with ADHD sometimes because you feel like it is emergent. It is an issue I know how to solve right now. They need this message right now.
It's on a helicopter blade that might go flying out of your brain. So you may not be able to remember it later. That's what people often fear, right? So the impulsivity is still there, even as they move on in age. So,
but it does help get the message to be received as intended.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other thing, is that a child receive the intended message is more important than conveying the message.
Absolutely. Because what if they're not in the space to hear it either? You know, you're completely right. That was a very good point. Very good point. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it does take a lot of mess ups and trial runs. Like, I was the first of five, and my parents are always saying, we're sorry. We got much better at this later on. So I do feel bad with my oldest, because he's got all the mistakes. And my youngest, during COVID, when with the shutdown, he was starting to get oppositional defiance disorder.
Sure.
But I had been through enough of the ADHD with my oldest and starting to understand the complexity of many of these different mental health issues that I got on, like, okay, what is this oppositional defiance disorder? How do you deal with this? And you deal with it very differently.
Mm-hmm.
But we were able to deal with it effectively way sooner, being exposed to the other ideas and parental failings.
Right. But see, I'm the fourth, so I'm the one that they just kind of like, okay, look, you're good. Like, go figure that. Like, I don't know. Hope it
We're
works out for
tired.
you. Yeah. That's kind of where I was. My sister and I, we could probably do whatever, and they come back and go, wait a minute, did we let you do that? Like,
And the oldest are all jealous. They were so permissive.
Yeah. I never got to do that. Dad let you do it. No. I know. I understand. But anyway, you're right. Parenting is hard, and it isn't perfect. We will make mistakes.
And it's harder when you have extra challenges that a lot of other parents don't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it does seem like there are more resources now, whether it's IEPs with schools, excellent counselors, better medication, better nutrients.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Better supplements. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. You're right about that. That's good.
I will say this was a lot more fun. I mean, we've talked
you
before.
Expected? Oh.
No. We've talked before.
Yeah.
I have liked talking, but this was fun to be in a studio for the first time doing a podcast. And I think this is going to be fun to do, and I hope that I hope we have another opportunity to come back and
we'll circle back. And
when are you going to be done with this book?
That's a great question. It's requiring. So my husband is in communications, and he's a writer by trade. So he's helping me with this, and so grabbing him when he isn't crazy busy, and then when he does stuff, then he comes to me, and I'm like, I'm slammed. And so we're trying to make it all happen. Our goal is just this year to kind of do that. And Claudia is doing the outline for the kitchen table therapy book. And a lot of that's going to be fun, because that's going to talk about how do you connect and collect your kids and get them to the kitchen table, if you will. And they're going to talk about growing up in a house with a psychologist and what that was like. And I think the other thing that's going to be fun,
it's a unique perspective.
is we're going to add recipes in there, because I wrote a little cookbook for them one Christmas, and I got it published through this little cookbook company, and it was called Kitchen Table Therapy, and it was the Middleton cookbook. And we've added recipes to that, and there's just family favorites and things like that. And I love to cook because I have to cook, because that's how we have to do that.
Yeah.
And so I have favorite cookbook authors, and I'm also a member of the prestigious Bean Club. It's the Rancho Gordo beans, or heirloom beans. And you get on this bean club, and they send you these beautiful heirloom beans from wherever, California, and they also have some partnerships with some farms in Mexico, and you get a batch of 4 every quarter, right? I love beans, and so I signed up to be on the Bean Club. It took me 2 years to be in the Bean Club. Like, they don't give it to everybody, and I remember calling my family and go, guys, I just made it into the Bean Club. And they're like, Mom, that's great. Yay, you. I'm like, yeah. So that book is going to happen.
It's disappointing to share something with someone who doesn't get it.
I'm like, what? But that book, the Kitchen Table Therapy book, will also probably be this year or next, because Claudia is the one who's spearheading that. And she's actually doing most of the writing on that. And she and Harriet are collaborating on that one. So I come into it, but probably just for the recipe part.
Well, let me know when it's done.
I'll let you know.
We'll
Thank
have
you.
to do this again.
Yeah, thank you.
And I may be following up later for the brownie recipe.
Oh my gosh, so good. Yeah, absolutely.
I could spend an afternoon.
This was fun. This was really fun. So
Well, thanks
thanks
for
for
your time.
having me over.
You bet.
Appreciate it. All right, take care.
That was fun.
That was fun.